Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1002, January the 2nd, 2020, Thursday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so today I want to, today is the first video to kick off the beginning of 2002. Of course, the most important thing that we talk about here on these videos and what these videos are all about is the SpyGate story. So what I want to do today is I want to focus on where I think this investigation is going, who do I think are going to be the people who are going to get caught up in it and eventually charged with crimes. And I want to focus specifically on the top two big fish in the pond, and that would be Barack Hussein Obama and the rotten Reverend Clinton. So I'm going to get started on that right away, but before I do, we have one new piece of important information, news information regarding Joseph Mifsud. And so I just want to put out this real quick before I get to the regular content of today's video. So we have just learned, 2 days ago, we learned that in the summer of 2017, during the height of the Mueller probe, Mifsud was at a conference in Saudi Arabia. And in that group with Mifsud was Treasury official Kathleen Bauer, B-A-U-E-R, along with CIA officer Michael Hurley, H-U-R-L-E-Y. So here we have right in the middle of the Mueller investigation, Mifsud in Saudi Arabia at some function and a group of people that included a top Treasury official, Kathleen Bauer, and a CIA officer named Michael Hurley. Now keep in mind, at this time, the FBI, the Mueller and the FBI have already learned now that Mifsud has likely lied to them. And so here they are, several months after learning that Mifsud had lied to them, and they have a State Department official and a CIA officer literally in a group with him at a function in Saudi Arabia, and they made no effort whatsoever to get him and hold him for questioning, which by this time, now they would have had plenty of evidence. Remember, Mifsud's the guy that started the whole thing, at least we're told. Operation Crossfire Hurricane. He's the one guy that could, if you're trying to find the link to Russians, he's the guy who said he was in Russia and heard this when he was in Russia and then passed it on to Papadopoulos. This is the one guy, if you want to get to the Russians who are behind the plot, this is the one guy you absolutely want to talk to. Yet here again, here is Mifsud, right along with two high-level government officials, and they make no effort to pick him up or even talk to him. I mean, they have agents in Saudi Arabia and close to that area. They certainly could have. They made no effort. Eventually, Uncle Bob the executioner has a lot of questions to answer, and here's another one. Now, so looking at this year ahead, of course, my prediction for the SpyGate investigation for 2020 is that Durham and Barr are going to be charging multiple officials, including FBI, DOJ, State Department, Department of Defense, Treasury officials. I've said before, I think there'll be 2 to 3 dozen officials. Now, anyone who touched the FISA warrant, the Carter Page FISA, all those who signed off on the Carter Page FISA warrants are going to be charged with crimes. That would be Comey signed off on 3 of them, McCabe, Sally Yates, and there's 1 or 2 other people all signed off on those. They're all going to be charged with crimes. That's just one of the crimes they'll be charged with. They'll be charged with many more crimes. And quite a few of those people are also going to be charged with lying to Congress, lying to the IG, whatever. So these people will be facing, all these people will likely be facing charges. Anyone who continued pursuing the investigation, the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, or continued pursuing even the Mueller investigation and everything else, anything after January 2017, which is when they learned that the dossier was complete garbage, anything that they did, anyone who participated in anything after January 2017 is going to be charged with crimes. So we are talking multiple dozens of people who are going to be charged with crimes. And that's just what we know now. And how do we know that? Well, both Barr and Durham came out within 30 minutes of the Horowitz report, came out and contradicted Horowitz by saying that in Horowitz's report, he said that the Operation Crossfire, starting that up, was properly predicated. Both Barr and Durham came out within 30 minutes and said no, they disagree, that they don't believe it was properly predicated. What does that mean? Well, that means that it was a crime. If it wasn't properly predicated, then that was a crime. So both Barr and Durham have already told us that the opening of the investigation, as far as what they know at this point, was done unlawfully, illegal. Anyone who had a hand in that is going to be charged with crimes. We know that the Durham investigation became a criminal, and of course the Justice Department came out and let it be known that the Durham review had turned into a criminal investigation. And we found that out immediately after it was announced that Horowitz had completed all of his witness interviews and was now going to move into the final process of preparing his report for release. And of course we found out later that there's a reason for that, that whenever there's an Inspector General investigation going on, they will not conduct a parallel criminal investigation at the same time. They wait for the Inspector General to complete his interviewing of witnesses until he's all done with his part of the investigation, and then they allow the U.S. Attorney or prosecutor, whatever it is, to go on and do their investigation, and then they can move into a criminal investigation. Now, it's very likely that Durham, having already been on the case for 7 months, likely realized that he was in a criminal investigation a long, long time ago. They just had to wait for Horowitz to finish his business. And, of course, we know from what Horowitz laid out in the IG report that there is overwhelming evidence of crimes, not mistakes, not errors, not lapses in judgment. Oh no, premeditated crimes. We also know that they've identified at least one person who has already been essentially found guilty. He hasn't been to court yet, but Horowitz makes perfectly clear in the IG report that Kevin Clinesmith clearly doctored that email where he said that Carter Page, he learned that Carter Page was a CIA asset, and he turned around and said just the complete opposite. Of course, we know Clinesmith worked at the FBI NSB, National Security Branch. He was in the small clique of people that knew everything that was going on. This dude is looking at quite a bit of jail time, and it's very likely that that will be the first person that Durham is going to go to work on to get him to flip on Strzok and Page and McCabe and Comey and some of the others that he was in that clique with. So that is another reason why we know that there's going to be multiple people, because Clinesmith is not going to just take the rap alone and keep his mouth shut. He's going to do everything he can to lighten up the sentence that he'll be facing, which will be fairly lengthy. Another thing, I did a deep dive on John Durham back about 2 months ago, and if you remember, we learned that Durham does not like to talk to the media, doesn't like to talk to the press, doesn't like to talk to anybody about his investigations, even after they're complete. John Durham investigates you, either you hear nothing or you get indictments. He doesn't come out and give press conferences very much. He rarely ever gives a speech. He's never really written a book or anything like that. But we found out that he did give a speech, one of the few he's ever given, back in 2006, and that speech was given to a class of law students. And we know the topic of that was the whole point and topic of that speech that he gave to those law students was how important it is to keep an eye on government officials because of the power that they have, that they can use against citizens. They can abuse their power. And so Durham spent this entire talk talking about how important it is to keep your eye on these individuals who have all this power, because it can be turned and used against American citizens who have done nothing wrong for political reasons or for other reasons. And we also learned from people who work with Durham that his number one pet peeve, and the thing that literally sets him off and drives him crazy, is a corrupt FBI or DOJ official. So, for all these reasons, I believe that we are going to see dozens of people charged with crimes, serious crimes, and many of these people are going to be facing multiple indictments because they committed many crimes. And many of these people are going to turn, they're going to give up what they know, and they're going to turn on each other. This is what always happens, and this will happen in this case as well. This is why even more people are going to be brought into this and are going to be facing serious felonies. Now, I want to focus on the two big fish. Now, of course, we know that would be Obama and the rotten Reverend Clinton. Now, it's kind of ironic, we see in this impeachment hearing against Trump, one of the two articles that they have against him is abuse of power. Abuse of power. Well, after Durham indicts all of these corrupt criminals and co-conspirators, and we all learn a lot more about what happened there in 2016-2017 in the coup effort, we're going to learn just from what we already know that Obama was aware of every bit of it, knew about everything. Whether or not Durham actually charges Obama, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I will say this, that it's likely the Republicans will win back the House in 2020. And if they do, based on everything that will be coming out over the summer as Durham is laying indictments and as we are learning the entire totality of the crimes that were committed and the fact that it went all the way to the top to Obama himself, I would think it's probably almost a slam dunk that as soon as the Republicans win back the Congress, one of the very first things they're going to do, remembering how the Democrats went after Trump for abuse of power when he did no such thing, but here they're going to have all this evidence of what Obama did, a clear abuse of power, and I think it's very likely that Obama is going to be impeached as a result of what comes out from the Durham investigation. And I would not rule out that he will not face some sort of penalty. Now, we generally don't send former presidents to jail. But when you have a situation like this, and we know that Obama was totally involved, we know because of the Strzok page texts, we know because both Clapper, Brennan, and Comey have all come out and said, yeah, Obama was kept abreast of everything. Comey told Brett Baer on Fox that everything that was used to get the warrants on Carter Page, the FISA warrants, every bit of that information that they had, that they used to get the FISA warrant, was shared with Obama. We have both Clapper and Brennan thanking Obama, going on TV and saying, yeah, well, thanks to Obama, because he's the one that basically gave us the go-ahead by producing the ICA to go ahead and begin this investigation. And of course, the ICA became essentially what some people have described as Obama's dossier. It laid the groundwork for the appointment of the special counsel, which was, of course, the coup effort, the attempt after they failed to stop Trump. That was their effort to pull off the coup. And Obama knew everything. We know about the January 5th meeting where Susan Rice writes her Cover Your Ass letter, where she tells us everyone that was in the meeting and essentially what they were talking about. So Obama knew everything. And we also have heard from other people who know that a counterintelligence operation must be approved by the President of the United States. And one of the very first things you do, because a counterintelligence operation is designed to protect who they think might be targeted, the very first thing they should have done was advise the Trump campaign that Russia may be targeting them. And of course we know from Horowitz in the hearings and in his report said that as far as he can tell through his investigation, no one ever made an attempt to give a counter intel briefing to the Trump campaign. Obama certainly would have known every bit of that, and therefore he's in a world of hurt. Whether or not they will actually charge him, I don't know. There's a lot of people around Obama who know that it's their role, if it ever comes down to it, to fall on their sword to save him and his legacy. Whether or not they will do that, I don't know. These people are a bunch of cowards and low-down, dirty dogs. So if I were Obama, I'd be sweating bullets, knowing that it's Clapper, Brennan, and Comey who are going to decide whether my ass is going to be fried or not. So I don't know what we can expect there with Obama, but he certainly will be in the crosshairs of Durham. It will probably come down to Barr deciding whether or not they actually want to make that move. And I would not be the least bit surprised if they do. It's 50-50 as far as I see it. Now, the Rotten Reverend Clinton. As you know, I am one of the few people out there who believe that she was the mastermind of all this. As I've said many times and have been saying for over a year, I believe that she planned, organized, directed, and controlled the entire operation. That this was a Rotten Reverend Clinton plot. And Lee Smith does go probably farther than most in his book, saying that, you know, she played a major role in all of this. And as far as the Clintons are concerned, they're very good at making sure that they don't leave their fingerprints on anything. They always leave themselves what they describe as plausible deniability, and they have other people do the dirty work for them. But there are so many things going on here that it's going to be very difficult to believe that the Rotten Reverend Clinton did not know. Remember, she paid for all of it. And let's go ahead and reestablish another thing that gets muddied up in the media, even on Fox or even other YouTubers who I think are doing a good job in trying to get to the truth. And we know from Donna Brazil's book that as soon as the Rotten Reverend Clinton captured the nomination, she immediately took over the DNC. Because immediately after she wins the nomination, she starts talking to Brazil about how they're going to coordinate. And Brazil informs her that, hey, I hate to tell you this, but we're flat broke. We ain't doing nothing. We'll be lucky to keep the lights on and make payroll. At which point, the Rotten Reverend Clinton was forced to write a check for $800,000 as soon as she won the nomination just to keep the lights on at the DNC. At which point, she informed Donna Brazil that because essentially she was having to carry the DNC, that she would be making all the decisions. And so, according to Donna Brazil's book, everything that came into the DNC was forwarded to Brooklyn, to Hillary's campaign headquarters, and that's where all the decisions were made about everything, and especially the expenditures of money. So Brazil was essentially just a figurehead over there to DNC, passing everything to Clinton. The Rotten Reverend Clinton was running the DNC the day after, within a few days after she won the nomination. So the Rotten Reverend Clinton and the DNC were one entity, run by the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign. So let's keep that in mind when you keep hearing people say, well, the DNC paid for this, the DNC was running this, it was the DNC hired Steele, the DNC did, no, the DNC, the Rotten Reverend Clinton was running the DNC, which hired Confusion GPS, which hired Steele, which hired Chalupa, which hired all these other people. Keep that in mind as we go through the following evidence. Now, I've been through this on 2 different times to make this case, but since the IG report has come out, and over the past couple of months, since I've previously done a video like this, we have learned a lot more. So I'm going to bring forth some new evidence as to back up my assertion that the Reverend Clinton was the mastermind, and the reason why I think that she could likely, very likely, get caught up in this. Well, she already is caught up in this, but whether or not she will face criminal liability is going to come down to a few critical questions that John Durham is going to be asking her, and we'll get to those here shortly. But first, let's just go through some facts that John Durham either already has discovered or will discover in the course of his investigation when he finally gets to this point. Oh, and one other thing I forgot to mention. Let's not forget about the unmaskings. Remember, Mike Rogers is now working with Durham. They've met multiple times. And Mike Rogers has obviously by now filled Durham in on those illegal 702 search queries. And the 3 contractors that were working for the FBI to do that. And the fact that it went all the way back to 2012. And the fact that there were thousands of people illegally targeted, and the fact that Susan Rice, head of the NSC, was the one that would have had to have approved of all of that. And of course we know that it was people in the NSC, Susan Rice herself, Samantha Power, others probably within the White House, maybe Ben Rhodes, we don't know who else, who would have authorized the unmasking of hundreds and hundreds of calls. And so that's another very high-level person that's going to be facing criminal prosecution, thanks to Mike Rogers. Now, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get into the Rotten Reverend Clinton and all the evidence that Durham is going to discover, or that he's already discovered, and the reason why I think that she could very likely be one person who's caught up in this and could face criminal prosecution. Despite the fact that the Clintons are pretty slick, John Durham is in a situation where he's going to have access to a lot of information, and he is not a friendly. The Clintons are always used to having friendlies investigating them. Not this time. So as we know, the Rotten Reverend Clinton uses proxies to do her dirty work. But we also know that Podesta, Robbie Mook, and others in her campaign will eventually be questioned by Durham, and he'll be asking them some very tough questions, and we'll find out whether Mook and Podesta and others in her campaign are going to take the rap and take the fall for the Rotten Reverend Clinton and lie and say that she didn't know anything, that they weren't relating any of the information to her, and that she was kept in the dark. I don't think Durham will believe that. I don't believe that. You don't believe that. We all know the Rotten Reverend Clinton probably was micromanaging every single bit of it, because she paid $12.4 million to Confusion GPS to dig up that dirt, to get that October surprise, which eventually, when that failed, they used it then to launch the coup. So let's see here. I do believe that even if they don't get the Rotten Reverend Clinton, that high-level people, particularly Podesta and Mook and possibly others in her campaign, while she may escape, though there will be people, high-level people in the Clinton campaign that will be facing charges. We know that the Trump-Russia narrative was started by the Clinton campaign the day after she lost the election. We know that because of the book Shattered, written by Amy Parnes. She and her colleague were on the Clinton campaign, and they're liberals who supported Clinton. They were on her campaign from day one for an entire year and a half, and they were there the morning after when they put the plot together. And according to her book, it says, so, the entire team, within 24 hours of the devastating loss, assembled to hatch the story. The scene, as painted with amazing detail by Allen and Parnes, sounds like a writer's room for a television drama. The creative writing team through lots of story ideas around to see which one the consensus would like the most. And they landed on Russia hacked the election, working with the Trump campaign. And according to Parnes, the Rotten Reverend Clinton wanted to make sure that the narratives were spun the right way to explain her embarrassing loss. And so Podesta, Clinton, and Mook hatched the narrative. Podesta and Mook assembled the Rotten Reverend Clinton's communication team at the Rotten Reverend Clinton's Brooklyn, New York headquarters on the day after her loss. They got together to engineer the Trump-Russia narrative. They wrote the script that they would pitch to the press and to the public. Russia hacking was the centerpiece of the story. And they would shame the media into carrying the narrative by telling the media that they were at fault for how they covered the story on her private server and playing a part in costing her the election. So they must now make amends by pushing the narrative that Putin hacked the election to help Trump and to prevent her from winning the election, and that Trump may have been involved in working with Putin. And that's how the Rotten Reverend Clinton and her cronies began the Trump-Russia narrative. So if Mr. Durham is wanting to get to the origins of the Trump-Russia narrative and how it got started, there it is. It's right there in the book, Shattered. We also know from the Steele deposition that he says in his deposition that he was hired to produce evidence that the Rotten Reverend Clinton's legal team could use to challenge the election results if she lost. And we also know from Steele that he says that he was hired by Mark Elias of Perkins Coie to carry out that mission. We know that Perkins Coie also hired Fusion, and that they were paid $12.4 million to have them create the Trump-Russia hoax. And we also know, as I just mentioned, that the Right Reverend Clinton was the DNC. So the idea that it was the DNC and the Clinton campaign, no, Clinton was the Clinton campaign. And if you think that the Right Reverend Clinton forked over $12.4 million for a dirty tricks campaign, a smear campaign, and that she wasn't being kept abreast of what was happening every day, and that she wasn't applying pressure on people to get results every day, you would be a damn fool. And I don't think Mr. Durham is a damn fool. We know that Fusion GPS first photo dossier appeared, it was a 15-page dossier, and it appeared on April 15th, 2016, 1 month before Steele's first report. We know that Steele went to FBI agent Gaeta in Rome back in June, and at that time, from day one, on the very first meeting he had with Gaeta, he admitted he was working for Confusion GPS, Perkins Coie, and the Rotten Reverend Clinton. They knew it from day one. Not only did the Rotten Reverend Clinton pay for the 2 dossiers that the smear merchants used to propagate the Trump-Russia collusion lie, but that Clinton associates and employees were actually sources for the lies that would be used to get the FISAs on Carter Page. And of course, the Rotten Reverend Clinton understands clearly the 2-hop rule. Then, of course, we talk about the dossiers. There were 2, both of which were paid for by the Rotten Reverend Clinton. And so we want to focus now on the Shearer dossier, because you don't hear much talk about the Shearer dossier, but let's do that now. According to Senators Grassley and Johnson, the first dossier, which we call the Shearer dossier, originated with a foreign source, likely based in Russia. And that source then passed information to an associate of the Clinton family, who then turned it over to a State Department official, who then delivered it to Steele. And who is Grassley and Blumenthal talking about? Well, they're talking about the source, the friend close to the Clinton family, was, of course, Cody Shearer. And then he passed it over to Blumenthal. And then Blumenthal gave it to Jonathan Weiner. Jonathan Weiner gave it to Christopher Steele. And then Christopher Steele gave it to the FBI. Right after the Grassley memo comes out, Jim Jordan goes on Fox and says, yeah, basically, quote, they paid Steele to put together the dossier and then told him what to put in it. Exactly. We also have Glenn Simpson. Glenn Simpson, who again, working for the Rotten Reverend Clinton, gave Bruce Orr a thumb drive with the dossier on it. It was the Shearer dossier. In that particular information, according to the Horowitz report, what was on that thumb drive that Simpson gave Bruce Orr, which he then passed along to the FBI, was an allegation that Putin was trying to influence Trump's decision on his pick for Secretary of State. And it also suggested, in fact, it dropped the name of a Russian intelligence officer who they claim was Carter Page's handler. This information that was on this thumb drive was from the Shearer dossier. And of course, Cody Shearer and Blumenthal are Hillary Clinton's henchmen. They work directly for her. Michael Sussman, Hillary Clinton's lawyer, met 2 times with James Baker, the essentially Comey's FBI lawyer. And Sussman gave CDs and documents to the FBI, to General Counsel Baker directly. And of course, we don't know everything that was there, but one of the things that was in this information that came from Sussman was that Trump's server in Trump Tower was communicating with this Russian Alpha Bank that somehow found its way into Steele's dossier. So Shearer dossier material was finding its way into Steele dossier material because it was all coming from the same place, the Rotten Reverend. The Clinton campaign then recruited Michael Isikoff through his close friend Glenn Simpson, and Isikoff became the point man for pushing the Trump-Russia narrative, fake news stories for Fusion GPS and Perkins Coie and the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign. Isikoff was also working with Alexandra Chalupa, who was also contracted by the Right Reverend Clinton / DNC, and as a contractor. And of course, Isakov went with Chalupa to Ukraine to meet with Ukraine officials to get dirt on Trump and Manafort. And of course, we have Ukraine embassy officials now on the record saying that they met with Chalupa as a Democratic Party operative to discuss exposing ties between Trump and Russia. And of course, we now have Chalupa denying that she was paid by the Right Reverend Clinton campaign. But of course, we know that the Right Reverend Clinton was essentially the DNC. And I think she's trying to mince words and say that she was being paid working for the DNC. But the DNC was the Right Reverend Clinton in the summer of 2016. She was running everything. Go read it. It's right in Donna Brazil's book. Durham knows everything that we know that I just told you and a whole lot more about the Right Reverend Clinton's involvement in the coup plot. But we already know that the Right Reverend Clinton used Perkins Coie, Fusion GPS, Steele, Blumenthal, and Shearer to falsely portray Trump as a Russian asset and to manufacture the hoax that Trump was a Putin asset and that they worked together to hijack the election. And of course, Clinton knew exactly what she was doing. That is why she did everything possible to hide the fact that it was her campaign that commissioned the dossiers, both of them, for over a year. And only after Devin Nunes won a legal case which forced Perkins Coie to come out and admit who paid for the dossier to the tune of $12.4 million did we find out it was the rotten Reverend Clinton. Durham is going to be wondering why, if there was nothing wrong with what she did, then why did they try so hard to cover it up for so long? Durham is going to eventually learn how much the Right Reverend Clinton knew about the activities of Fusion GPS, Steele, Blumenthal, Shearer, Weiner, Bruce Anelli, and Michael Sussman. Durham is eventually going to learn how much the Right Reverend Clinton knew about all the above-mentioned characters, activities, and pipelining the lies into the FBI and the State Department. Durham will eventually learn what contact the Right Reverend Clinton or her operatives had with Mifsud, Halper, and Downer, and if she or the campaign coordinated with the CIA, the FBI, the State Department, the DOD, any foreign governments, or private intelligence firms, other than the ones we already know about. Durham is eventually going to learn from the Right Reverend Clinton if Sussman had any contact with Gina Haspel, John Brennan, Strzok, Page, McCabe, Lynch, or Comey. Durham is eventually going to learn how much contact or coordination the Right Reverend Clinton, Mook, or Podesta had with Blumenthal and Shearer. He is eventually going to learn about the contacts or coordination with Chalupa or Ukrainian officials. He is eventually going to learn about the contacts or communications with the media, directly or indirectly. These are all the things that Durham is going to learn on top of everything he already knows. And I believe when he gets to the bottom of that he is going to have no choice but to conclude that the Right Reverend Clinton was a major player in this, and the fact that she was at the very beginning of planning, organizing, directing, and controlling this entire coup plot. Just as Christopher Steele said in his deposition, he was hired to put together evidence, to acquire evidence that the Right Reverend Clinton could use to challenge the election in the event that she lost. Of course, the information he put together could not be verified, therefore it wasn't able to be used as the October surprise, so it was morphed into something that they could use it for that would damage Trump. It eventually worked its way into getting FISA warrants, which would then be used to spearhead the effort to get a special counsel and to further the coup plot. So the Right Reverend Clinton is up to her eyeballs. I do believe that Durham is going to come to that conclusion and that she too will be facing serious criminal allegations. But certainly, even if she manages to slip off the hook because everybody falls on the sword and says she knew nothing, at least we know Podesta, Mook, and some other high-level campaign officials will pay the ultimate price for falling on the sword for the Right Reverend. They'll be going to federal prison along with Comey and the rest of the bunch. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See ya. Bye.